though, has occurred too. A new parliament is in place. The new government has begun working on a new plan for the justice system. Development aid is returning to the country, and embassies are reopening. Somalia has seen transitional processes collapse over the past 2 decades. But from what I've heard from a few people I know in the diaspora community, is that there's a feeling that this time things have the real potential to be different. This time it might really stick. One of the surest signs of that is actually you in the diaspora community. Many of you have returned to Somalia, and many of you for the first time in a very long time, and to serve in some capacity, some in Parliament and some in other ways in NGOs. And you're going to hear today from a variety of speakers with a variety of perspectives, and I hope it is enriching and helpful for all of you, both individually and as a community. So once again, thank you very much for coming. It's our honor to host you here. And I'm now happy to turn the podium over to Hamse Warfa. So without any further ado from me, Hamse.
I'll try to make my remarks short in light of the time change. Let me just say that, the overall vision of IHASA is to work the attainment of a peaceful and coexistence of the Horn of Africa region-wide, one where its economies are integrated, but at the same time is sustained through mutual understanding. Our objectives include promote comprehensive regional peace, where conflict is minimized or eliminated, enhance sustainable security, foster economic development and reduction in poverty. To achieve our objectives, the organization employs a 3-step implementation strategy. The first one being a peace building. The basis for achieving a peaceful and well-integrated state institutions in the Horn of Africa primarily hinges on mapping the conflicts and then building a constituencies of peace. The second implementation strategy of IHASA is good governance. And in that spirit, we want to have organizations and institutions that promote good governance and inclusive democratic system polity. Some of the current projects which IHASA engaged include promoting enhanced participation by women in Somali political space. The third layer in our implementation strategy is economic integration. We strongly believe that the ultimate hope for the Horn of Africa region is to enhance its economic and social development lies in the integration of its various economies. And that can only be achieved after peace and good governance are put in place. For those of you who have not seen the program, it's here. And would be, Abdi, if you can help pass out the flyers, the programs. Since 2008, IHASA has embarked on peace-building activities. We have held a number of academic conferences on topics including but not limited to transitional justice, the role of women, children's rights, building constituencies of peace, enhancing role of the diaspora in regional affairs. Now about this year's conference, just to echo what my colleague Patrick said, it has been over a little year since we held our last conference. Some of you might recall, our conversation at the time was one marked by great enthusiasm pertaining to the newly found prospect for lasting peace and lasting resolution to the resilient political problems of Somalia and the region at large. Due to the unique position which Somalia occupies in the region and the prospect for a stable Somalia looming large, our conference today will be dedicated to that country's need for reconciliation and social repair, promoting good and sustainable governance and development. And so we have tasked with our speakers to discuss and deliberate on 3 interrelated topics today. Some of our speakers will look back at the root cause of the failure of the Somali state as a result of the 1991 civil war and the subsequent massive violence of civilians. And the goal is to develop a more effective approach to reconciliation. So today, both in Somalia and among the diaspora, as we have been engaged over the last few years, there is lively discussion on the need for comprehensive reconciliation. We believe that the key to the realistic attainment of an effective reconciliation requires to first map the conflict. To that end, we have dynamic presentation on the meaning of Somali's mass violence and new innovative approach to social reconciliation, led by Dr. Ludwin, who is visiting us from Wellesley College at Boston. We also decided to concentrate on governance and development in light of the provisional federal constitution, which Somalia adopted in August of 2012. There are significant gains made since the adoption of the constitution, but there are obviously some numerous challenges, I should say, in the implementation of it. The creation of federal states, as well as the slow progress in establishing key commissions that could have really been an effective tool to implement the constitution, has been some of the challenges that we are experiencing as we speak. A big question that we asked some of our esteemed panelists is to think outside of the box and look at workable approach to rebuilding sustainable system of governance within the interim federal constitution. And Faisal and few of his colleagues will be leading that conversation. The third key area of today's conference deals with the precarious security condition in Somalia and its implications for the entire region. In light of the recent horrific attack of Nairobi Westgate Mall, followed by the subsequent threats issued by Al-Shabaab on Uganda to attack Uganda, we have asked our experts to, in this field, to give us a critical assessment of the current situation and ways to defeat Al-Shabaab so that the country can reclaim its public space to carry out reconciliation and good governance. I want to curtail my opening remarks to be respectful of the limited time we have with such a distinguished speakers with us today. And to summarize in Somali, aad baad u mahadsantihiin mar kale, ujeedada intaanan gelin shirka uu ku saabsan yahay intiina aan macadka cilmi baarista geeska Afrika aan aqoon geeska Afrika arrimaha geeska Afrika waxaa la aasaasay 2008 waxaa tiir u ah 3 qodob ka ugu horeeyay uu yahay nabadeynta geeska Afrika si loo helo dad maaragtay isku xiran sida iskugu xiran yihiin wadamada geeska Afrika waynu wada garanaynaa hadda eegto xaaladda Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia hadday noqoto xagga humanitarianka, xagga siyaasadda, markaad weliba gaar ahaan inakoo Soomaaliya oo maaragtay 3 wadan iyo Djibouti degaba aad ku darto. Qodobka labaad ee lafdhabarka u ah hawsha IHASA waxa weeyaan in la isku xiro dhaqaalaha uu isku furmo maaragtay wadamada deriska ah si qof kasta oo geeska Afrika uguna uga faa'iido iyadoo la qadarinayo dhammaan wixii maaragtay culture ah iyo qolo walba ay wixii gooni u ah u tahay haddana inay isku furmaan sida maaragtay East Africa community-ga hadda dhaqaalaha jira faa'iidooyinka ay ka heleen wadamada ka qaybta ka arinta waynu ognahay. Qodobka saddexaad maaragtay IHASA u taagantahay waxa weeyaan sidii loo horumarin lahaa ama loo heli lahaa dawlad dhisan oo habaysan. Dhammaanteen waxaa halkan ina keenay burburkii dawladdii aynu ka nimid ee Soomaaliya, qaarkiin Ethiopia ama qaarkiin maaragtay wadamada kale. Waxaan aaminsanahay inay laf dhabar u tahay si loo helo dhaqaale isku xiran dadku u wada hormaro. Nabaddu inay u tahay furaha koowaad, furaha labaadna inuu yahay in la helo dawlad cadaalad ku salaysan horumarinta dadkeeda ka shaqeysa. Marka 3 qodob baa IHASA u ah laf dhabar. muddadii la soo dhaafay shaqooyin badan baan maaragtay gaar ahaan xaggan Mareykanka intaan joogno aan ka qabanay. Waxaa kamid ah 2010kii shir aad u weyn oo ugu 1500 qof ka soo qayb galeen oo halkan lagu qabtay. Sanadkii 2011kii waxaanu iskaashi la sameynay 2 hay'adood aad u waaweyn, hay'adda Woodrow Wilson Center iyo Alliance for Peace Building. Waxaa ka soo baxay book manuscript aad u weyn. manuscriptiga cidii aan akhrinin ama buugga daneynaya website-ka IHASA ka heli karaa ihasa.org. 2012kii raali ahaada waxaan halkan ku qabanay shirkii laga hadlayay xaaladda Soomaaliya ku sugan tahay sidii hore uga socon lahayd discussion aad iyo aad maaragtay muhiim u ah oo lively ah baynu halkan ku yeelanay marka maanta ujeedadeenu waxaa weeyaan in aynu ka faa'iidaysano khibrada waaweyn ee inooga yimid meelaha kala duwan Ambassador David Sheen oo wada garanaysaan oo Washington DC inooga yimid Professor Ludwin Boston inooga timid Faisal Roble iyo Fawziyo aan u baahnayn inaan introduction u sameeyo oo maaragtay Faisal ba waxaan ku lahaa part time inaad hadda nala noolaataan baan doonaynaa reer Minnesota hadaan nahay marka runtii sharaf iyo cizi bay inoo tahay khubro badan oo local inoo ah walaashay habboon ay kamid tahay Cabdirasaaq Maxamed Kaynaan marka uguma talagelinaan speakers oo dhan wada mention gareey laakiin aan tusaale idin siiyo panel walba waxaynu haysanaa ugu yaraan 4-5 qof oo si dhab ah gudaha ugu gali doona waxyaabaha aynu inta badan sida aan macnaha weyn ku jirin fadhi ku dirka meelaha looga shaqeysto sidii iyadoo cilmiyeysan u sameyn lahayn natiijada ugu muhiimsan ee shirkan ka soo bixi doontana waxa weeye shirarkii sida shirarka badan ee kale aynu qabsana oo inaga noqonin waxa lagu hadlaa iyo maaragtay waxay khibrado inoo soo bandhigaan in la document gareeyo book laga soo saaro buuggaas oo maaragtay aynu meel walba la geyn doono reference u noqon doono hadda kaliya ma aha mustaqbalkaba marka mar kale waad mahadsantihiin waxaan ku soo dhaweynayaa mikrofoonka panelka koowaad first panelka waxa weeyaan Faisal Roble iyo Dr. James Daus back there Dr. Ludwin waxaana lafdhabar u ah Professor Ludwin book ee qortay la yiraahdo Clan Cleansing Faisal iyo Dr. Jamesna waa discussions waxay ka caawin doonaan inay professorada maaragtay buugeeda iyo ka fahankooda inay nala wadaagaan marka waxaan idinku soo dhaweynayaa may I ask the first panel to join me here
I get on some of the websites, and that would mean like, who is this person from the outside who's taking, who's steering on one particular kind of Somali? And I know that sincerity itself is not enough. So if I say I really tried Da'at Banaha, that's not enough because in the name of Da'at Nemo, very bad things happen. But I think what I would like to ask you, Somalida waxay tiraahdaa barsha horteed hay nicin. Aniga waxaan oran lahaa Boogie, akhriska hortiis ha nicin. Akhriska hortiisna aad ha u jeclaanin. So don't hate it before you read it. Don't love it too much before you read it. Because I really tried, if you write about violence, you cannot be neutral. You cannot see, on the one hand, it's okay to kill people. On the other hand, it's not okay to kill people. So what you try to be is to be impartial. So if you see large-scale violence against civilians, which is what I have studied, then you call it. And if you see it by one warlord, you call it. And if you see it by another warlord, you try to call it. So that's really what I've tried to do. The other thing that is awkward, I think, this is the first time I talk about the book in a Somali venue, in front of Somali people. There are many of you who will always know much more than I ever will. And so what I would like to start my talk with then is to talk a little bit about how the project found me and why I came to write the book. So I have a couple of sayings. Wahyele wahilmama, wahlayele mahilmamo. The perpetrator tends to forget, but the victim doesn't. And the other one is from Michael Ignatieff. War crimes challenge collective moral identities, and when these identities are threatened, denial is a defense of everything one holds dear. If bad things were happened in your name, even if you didn't do it, it's very hard to step away from that. It's very hard to take responsibility. That is hard for being a Dutch person and the slave trade. That is hard for anybody in whose name bad things happen. So I hope that we will understand that if people in this room are differentially related to the topic, that we try to respect that. Because it's easier if you're the victim and you have survived and people talk about you than if you're not the victim and some of the people you associate with were the perpetrators. And then a favorite novel of mine and Michael's fugitive pieces, what is dearest to us is often dearer than the truth. Let's see. Sorry, I will go one back. Let me let this go.
Will you get closer to that microphone?
Excuse me. Maybe it has to come closer to me. Is this better? Yeah? Okay, so when I started the project, the last book that I did, which probably many of you did not need to pay attention to, was a book about, or at least half a book, about Somali pop songs in the beautiful period of nationalism. And I focused particularly on how women and men in the songs used to speak to each other. Horta baro ta'lintio bugio digalko bado yoho ha diprawele Anyway, so this is where I was coming from. I had done this about this beautiful time in Somali history. Of course, there were problems, but that national culture was alive and well. And so when I finally got some free time from my college, I said to myself, well, let's see what the songs say about violence. And what I found is that the songs did not say very much about violence because they are by young kids and they did not have much authority. And so then I started to look at some of the poetry. And I went to Djibouti, and some of my friends in Djibouti, Mohamed Abdullahi Riraj, Mohamed Ar Afrah, you may know some of the people associated with Halabur, they kept saying, okay, Ladan is not political. Ladan is going to look at good poetry. And so what I ended up looking for then was the poetry that could be recited in front of Somalis, at the reconciliation meetings, in front of old Somalis. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Unfortunately, I'm going to read them to you in English. I have one here called Musibo, or Disaster, by Mustafa Sheikh Elmi, Ali Yarhamu, I think he has passed away, who witnessed the violence perpetrated in Mogadishu. And he did, I think, a poem called Musibo, Disaster, that both did a very powerful description and also an interpretation. And I'm just going to read a few paragraphs. Let me explain what moves me to speak to you today, he said. Dear God, how much wealth was obliterated in the fighting. How many poor and destitute folks went down with it. People and property both destroyed. They threw our flag in the ditch, blown along. How many capable individuals and strong, brave, and brilliant men did we lose? How many tall houses were reduced to rubble? How many multi-storied buildings brought down and burned? How many mud houses were blown high into the sky? How many cannons were let loose on us without interruption? How many bullets did they shower on us like rain? How we scattered in all directions. How people moved now more forwards than backwards. How they cut the ropes of our ships, throwing us to the wild beast. And I know we all know people who perished on the sea and who perished escaping over land. How many were thrown as food to the wild animals in forest and plain. Every enclosed space they turned into a grave. On how many bodies, that since yesterday or the day before, did flies throng? As we staggered on, we were no longer able to move our legs from exhaustion. Our lips crusted over, none of their shine remaining. How did exhaustion show itself on the Habo and Fadumo? How they mounted sweet-smelling girls and married women. How many hijab-wearing girls had their belts torn from their waist? How were women pursued into mosques they deemed safe? 3 generations of women raped on the same mat. Time and again they stabbed virgin girls who had not yet been deflowered. Inandip is Marasillo, Marbaba, Lagadul Gaudide. Mahatshabada bolet, Wihi Dulak Alogoye. Masajida ay Dabagalen, Dumar, Aman Moden. Sadah dir Usudalay, Lagukuf Saday, Deren Halkitilay. Hadba Enantadahan e Furnen, Daria Toreida. So this is part of his description of what happened. It's also really interesting because you have to remember these were the poets of the nationalist generation and probably of your generation, quite a few people here. He said, they threw our flag into the ditch, blown along by the wind. The hearts that were entwined split apart and have been impossible to repair. We look to God for our reward, as he is the always generous. But let me go back and add one last word of advice. for people who were born together of the same stock, tracing their descent to the same origin, with no differences in skin color, culture, religion, or language. To be divided by war and animosity is foolishness. Scrape the rust off your hearts and cleanse your inside. Hold on to your togetherness and strengthen your unity. And this is, of course, very familiar to you. This is the idea of the Qaranimo, of the nationalism, of the unity, of the same origin. I have another example from Abdelkader Abdishube, and it's just one verse, I'll read it to you, in which case we see also analysis of what was going on in their view, in this poet's view. Give them what, this is called Durban Garasho, the young. Give them what they need, you drum of wisdom. Tell them that God decreed this. Point out the responsibility that has been shirked. Explain to them who deceived them, who made stupid people out of them. Led them astray, hid the truth from them, pushed them towards disaster, and hid behind clan, working on their feelings by appealing to kinship, obsessed with greed, paying you off with something that doesn't even wet your lips, promising to give you wealth that they do not have, degrading what they advocate and egg you on to do with no feeling whatsoever, and hiding from you that God is generous, endlessly munificent, and can give to whomever he wants, but that we must make an effort. Drum, tell the people this on my behalf. So if you read chapter 1 of the book, you will find a number of poems, including also actually Abdi Muhammad Raga Uwasi Dadakhshu, who is actually one of the few poets who touches a little bit on agency. And what happened to me then, as I had been to Djibouti and to others and to Toronto and to Minneapolis and found poetry that spoke in that conciliatory way, at some point I am translating in the middle of the night and I actually literally fell off my chair and I said, oh my God, they never say who did what to whom. Why can't they say that? Is it that painful that it cannot be said? And then I said to myself, well, actually, who did what to whom? What do we really know about it? And so this is then became my project of looking at this part of Somali history, which I have ended up calling clan cleansing. I will tell you why, and you can agree or disagree. And so one of the big challenges I feel about the book and also about talking about the book is that it was really three things. I tried to see what the poetry was saying, and they really describe it and analyze it in terms of clan, qabil, qaran, iyo, Islam. Yeah, so those are the three pillars that people used to explain. A qabil used to be the evil twin of qaran, and then qaran and Somali traditional culture, really Islam and Hiddo iyo Deen were together. It's really with the fundamentalists that those have begun to split. So that is the discourse of their analysis. So then when I started the project, not only did I have to prove it really happened to people who were denying it, as some of you here, maybe some, not some of you here, and then at the same time saying, well, how could we talk about that in the present without simply restarting the war of the pen? And so I'll try in my talk to do both a little bit, to tell you why I think it deserved the name of clan cleansing, why I think it was a key shift in the Somali Civil War, and then at the same time propose some ideas that maybe we can start to use so that we don't just say, draw up the same lines, at least in our talk and in our hearts all the time. Okay, so my book is a study, let me find my place. My book is a study of the changing use of large-scale clan-based violence against civilians as a political instrument between 78 and 92. So what I asked myself, how was large-scale violence against civilians used between 78, so the Barra regime, and then in 92? And I can, in the Q&A, answer why I stopped at 92. And then chapter 2 of the book is totally dedicated to trying to analyze, and I'm using secondary sources here, the regime of Mohamed Siad Barre. Because I really think, and I don't know what you think, that that regime was the cradle of many of the things that came after. But that doesn't mean, one, that that regime belonged to one clan or one clan family, nor does it mean that the people who took over in 1991 don't have responsibility. So I want to say how are the deeper causes already in the Barre regime. So my book then, and I will not be able to talk about that chapter here. It acknowledges, the book, the relevance of earlier Somali history and presents the increasingly violent and divisive policies of the military regime of Mohamed Siad Barre as crucial causal factors of what comes after. I also distinguish between the Barre regime and the large-scale violence by the Barre regime, particularly Muduk and Hargeisa, of course, the northwest, and then the war of the militias that follows the clan cleansing. So when USC attacks Jez in Afgoy, now we have warlords fighting each other. And that is to me a new stage of the war, and you can read about that more maybe, or ask me more questions. So the book traces, analyzes the Barre regime. It also follows what I call the wars of the militias that run parallel and follow the clan cleansing campaign. But the major contribution of the book is undoubtedly the documentation and interpretation of what I call the ruinous turn of 1991, what happened in Mogadishu and South and Central Somalia in those 2 years. All right, so I hope that a conceptualization, not just of why, I said that, let me skip that. So why do I call 1991 a key shift? I will start with that, and then later I will talk a little bit about why I ended up calling it the clan cleansing. So there are 4 reasons, and you can either read them or I can summarize them for you. The first is that the violence that was done by the USC in particular in Mogadishu in 1991, after Mohamed Siad Barre is expelled on the 26th of January, very late at night, was violence that happened outside of the institutions of the state. And maybe just what I should briefly mention, in the chapter on the Barre regime, the 2 examples of large-scale violence against civilians are the examples of what happened in Muduk in 79 to 81, where the group of people whom Siad saw as the clan of the SSDF, he associates the people of Muduk with the SSDF that has just been established in Ethiopia, and he attacks them. Those are crimes, well, crimes against humanity are certainly large human rights violations. The second, of course, that we all know about is when the SNM not only establishes itself, but enters Somali territorial space. The Barre regime punishes the SNM, the relatives, the clan it associates with the SNM. And if you read chapter 2, of course, it did make a difference that the SNM entered Somali territory and that the SNM put its fighters in civilian clothes among the civilian population, because it gave it the government a rationale for attacking. Nobody in the Northwest deserved what they got. Yeah, whether you call them war crimes or crimes against humanities, that was also large-scale violence against civilians by the government. And it included an element, to my mind, of targeting ISAC individuals, civilian individuals, and therefore included an element of clan cleansing. People agree or disagree with me, but I think there was an element of that when people were bombarded, when they fled. You know, about 5,000 people are documented to have been killed, not even within any view of any fighting. So that was my conclusion in the book. Now, but when you come to 1991, you know, when people talk about the Barre regime's large-scale crimes against humanity, the people of Galkayo don't say that there was a general of a particular clan who attacked them. They say the Barre government attacked us. They know the clan background of the person who led that attack, but they don't see it as a clan issue, right? They saw it as a state, a government issue. So my argument is, if you get attacked by a government that is not a representative government, but in which many different people, of different backgrounds are the top leaders, that is different than when there is no state. And now you do two things, and that will be 2 and 3 for me. Sorry, number 2. Not only are you targeting civilians for violence, you're targeting on the basis of their clan for violence, but you're also inciting individuals on the basis of their clan for violence. So that is a key shift to me. Outside of the institutions of the state, individuals were targeted on the basis of clan, but also incited to violence on the basis of clan. And then I think the other thing that everybody knows about, which I use the reversal of the axis of opposition, which is kind of a complicated way of saying the following. When the Barre regime attacked civilians, it did because it saw them as family of the armed fronts. And the idea was, the motivation was to destabilize and weaken the fronts. That is true for Muruk, that's true for the Northwest. But when the USC takes Mogadishu, it is no longer those who are with the government and who are against the government. Now it is those who are with the government of the right clan are welcome, and those who had nothing to do with the government and or of the wrong clan are no longer welcome and are being chased out. So this shift, which you've all felt in your hearts, I think, which makes a opposition between the opposition between the government and the opposition groups now is displaced by clan. You are either belonging to the clan that takes power and you're safe, or even if you were just coming out of prison, you had been a custodian. If you're not of that clan, you are now targeted for violence and expulsion. So I think that is a very important key shift. And then finally, and this I came up with, I really, from reading, comparative reading about large-scale violence in civilians, Rwanda, former Yugoslavia, other places. Often, when large-scale violence against civilians happens, it is being concealed and denied while it is happening. And this, I think, was also the case then with 1991. And when I started to do my research, and you will read this in chapter 3, who wrote about, whatever you call it, yeah, the expulsion, the terror warfare and the expulsion of the whole set of clans who are now associated with Barre somehow. Who has written about it? Who has written about it? You're going to say Sharyama Amr Isa, whose book I just got, Karanchapki Somalia. There's another book that I used, written by a man called Der in Nairobi in Somali. But basically, if you look at the news coverage, the human rights organization coverage, you look at scholarship by Somalis and non-Somalis, this gets skipped. People go straight from Barre is expelled and there is chaos to USC Ali Mahdi and USC Aidid fight together. There is nothing in between. There is chaos in between. There is no acknowledgement that something happened there. And this actually then for me became an extra reason then to keep researching and writing this and to dig up every scrap of paper on this. And if you read the book, you'll find that it is largely not based on oral accounts, that it mostly uses other sources. So denials then are also part sometimes of a diagnostic that something really bad happened. And the denials, I think, if you follow the Somali websites, you realize they're still going on, and they will probably still go on for some time. Okay, so I had different kind of denials. I will just be very brief about that. A literal, factual, blatant denial is like, okay, nothing happens. Yeah, Barre is expelled, he's shooting at people in the city, and he did, of course, with his artillery. And then there was chaos, and then there is USC and Ali Mahdi a fight in Mogadishu. That's just the denial, it didn't happen, right? There are other forms of denial. For example, I really am not going to use names, but if you look even at the political memoirs of Hussein Ali Douala and others, you really get very strange stories. You will say like 200,000 people of Darod people fled Mogadishu because they were scared when their dictator was overthrown. You really get this kind of a distortion of the truth. And what you also get is that people say, oh, the dictator was a particular clan, and all the people in Somalia or in the city got really mad with that clan, and they started to drive out. That's not analysis. That's not analysis. That's abstaining from analysis, because that's not what happened. That means that you do not give any responsibility for the people who organized and incited and led this campaign. Right? As if there was no organization. Instead of just people got mad. And I think you can prove that that was not just the case, and that people were. Okay, why do I use the term of ethnic cleansing? I will try to go a little bit more quickly. This is a term that was used in the context of former Yugoslavia, and it basically means that you use terror warfare to kill or expel people to make an area homogeneous. And I think, if you look at Mogadishu today even, but if you look at the campaign which I trace from, actually I trace it coming in. Actually, if I'm really honest with you, and you will read it, I see it starting with the attacks on the refugee camps in the northwest. I see it happening with the attacks on the refugee camps in Jalalaksi and Beledweyne. I see it roll into Mogadishu, and then it gains power in Mogadishu, and it rolls back up to Galkayo, but also through the inter-riverine to Kismayo. And then back and forth between Kismayo twice, of course, with the comeback of the Daro-based alliances, and then out to Ghetto even. So I use that term because it's an international legal term. And if people would like to talk about that, then I'm willing. So why then, maybe to sum up at least this part, why do I then think that the clan cleansing campaign is analytically distinct? Why do I argue it is something new? So first of all, I would say it's the scale. It's the time span, it is the geographical scope, and it is the numbers of people affected. 2, it's okay, I can stop many places, you know. Alhamdulillah, boogie wuchra moktai, wala akhrin kara. So I'm arguing scale, I'm arguing the kind of violence, because it included communal violence, violence by civilians, violence by people who knew other people and went after people they knew. And I would say intent. I think there was organization. I think there were ways of inciting people with hate narratives. And those hate narratives I will not have time to talk about much today, but they would be 100 years of Daro domination. They would be related to Hobyo. They would be related to Fakash. And those would be the code words. Haradiga Siat, who really was Haradiga Siat in this period, right? So there are hate narratives and code words that were being used in this time period. And those I discussed in chapter 4. And I think that when you take them together, they add up to intent, that you can prove intent. Then I would add to that what is unique about this episode of Somali history is the ongoing lack of public acknowledgement. So people say, Anis Afinno, absolutely, that is a very good religious and Islamic principle. Mahan isku Afinno. And what you hear is ship. No, you don't get an answer then, you know. And then the other thing I would say is that and this was so striking to me when I was writing, I'm 20 years after this event, ongoing concealment, distortion, and denial. And some of that is still happening on the website. You can be witness to it if you're interested to it. But, you know, the last one I think that was fired at me a little bit below the belt was like, I read it this way, Wallahi mada'in. But on the other hand, Wallahi you did it too. And I'm thinking like, okay, I'm a white da'aday, and then you can say you did it too. I'm a madda'in, and then you can say you did it too. So the level really of the website attacks, I'm not going to respond to, because there will hopefully be also serious criticism and for us to understand this better. I think I'm just going to quickly, I will just say then, I will not do my whole talk, I will say 3 things. What have I tried to do, you know, by bringing this into the present? And honestly, my first period was working on the poetry. Second 2 years or so, I was trying to dig up sources. And by the way, there are transcripts of Radio Mogadishu in this period. So when people, we are not talking, three things that I'm trying to say. One is that, please, can we stop blaming whole clans for what was done or incited to by some leaders? Because if we keep saying, Reer Hibbel did this to Reer Hibbel, even though you felt it that way, it was not the case. Of the people who I interviewed for the book, What Happened to Them in Mogadishu, it was after I wrote these vignettes down that I found that almost every one of them was saved by an individual in the name of whose clan people were killing. Yeah? So clans did not kill people killed in the name of clan, one. And I think I feel almost like Nuruddin Farah, who used to come to us in Boston and other places. We should never say Anagu, we should say Anigu, you know? We should begin to speak in our own voice and not just hide responsibility. So that's one. Now, I understand that if you say clans did not kill, right? But people killed in the name of clan. My next job then was, well, why did so many people participate? Yeah? And that one is not something I have time for now, because in the book what I'm trying to do, why did so many people participate in the killing? And when the road-based alliances come back to Mogadishu, there was also horrible violence done in the inter-riverine area. What causes that? What allows that to happen? And so in the book, I really tried very hard to give a sense of the economic circumstances, of the political circumstances, of the breakdown of the state, of the arrival of war and the breakdown of law and order, of the kids who just participated because it was opportunity with impunity, all these different factors. But what I focus on then is the stories that were being told. And I call them mythical hate narrative, mythical clan hate narratives. I will not have time to explain to you fully what I mean with that, but they are a kind of using fact and fiction to make people hate. So you will get a little bit of Hobyo, you get a little bit of 100 years of Daro domination, you get a little bit of painful memories of the people of Mogadishu when a new middle class moved in, right? A lot of a legitimate feeling that people had, but you spin it to say, hey, if you don't pick up a gun now, you will be late at the hour of victory. And if you don't pick up the gun now against these people, you will not have a place in the sun. That's no longer a story of clan. Basically, the stories that clans talk about themselves. Now you have a story with a lethal spin. And so I try to unpack that in the book. And then finally, and this is particular, I think, for the women in the audience, you know, this is very difficult for a Somali audience, but can we make clan matter and not matter at the same time in this way? If you are seen by the US as a black person, you are more than a black person. You are also probably a teacher or a worker or an elder, or you are from a particular place. So you are not just a black person, right? So you don't want to be reduced to your blackness. But you do understand there is racism out there that you have to keep an eye on. If you're a woman, you know you cannot be reduced to your womanhood, because you also have to be a pilot and a teacher and a sister. Well, that's womanhood maybe, but there's many other things that you're going to have to do in life than your womanhood. You don't want to be reduced to that. You are many other things too, but you know that sexism and gender discrimination is out there. You keep an eye on it. So what I would hope that Somalis would get to at some point is say, yes, we understand that clan is a political tool. And if you add violence to that, and people get targeted for violence on the basis of their clan, or people perpetrate violence on the basis of their clan, how do you come back from that? That is heavy politics. But at the same time, you cannot reduce anyone only to their clan. So if you could think a little bit and say, yes, we understand clan and clan-based violence has changed us as a people. It has changed each and every one of us. It has changed each and every group. But if we don't analyze that, and if we already always think we know what that means, then even in the federal states of Somalia, the regional states of Somalia, there will be a lot of Somalis living together. And I don't think they want to live together as masters and ra'iya, yeah, and subjects, because that idiom, that discourse, we recognize too from 1991. So I hope you read the book, because the book is more eloquent than I am. Thank you.
And you won't understand what she's talking about until you read each and every page. I read twice, and I reviewed the book for the Wardair website. And what she talks about is that really touches nerves when it comes to Somalis. Some guy wrote an article on the book and posted on hiranonline.com, and the first sentence he began with was saying that I haven't read this book, but here is my review, about 5-6 pages of review. It's only possible, for Somalis to say that they haven't read the book, which is about 310 pages, with all the bibliographies and documentation, and make a judgment. So you can tell the hard work that she has to do in order to convince everybody, at least to read and then take a position. Some guy also saying the book talks about this, but officially it was only one review. So working and putting scholarship to Somalis has its own difficulty. You have to really know how to meander through the waves. As you know, Mogadishu was the most cosmopolitan cities that Somalis have had in their history, and that will continue for a long time. And each one and everyone remember exactly, probably, if you were born in Mogadishu, fine. If you were not born, you probably remember the day that you reached in Mogadishu. For me, I used to hear a lot of stories about Mogadishu from my late dad, who served in the Italian fascist army, and talked about a city with big boulevards juxtaposed with narrow alleys that housed very historic buildings. And I don't have to tell you the neighborhoods that Mogadishu used to have, whether it is Shangani or Hamarwain. It was a gem for the Somalis. In 2005, going back to the old days of Mogadishu, I wrote an article called Mogadishu, The Tale of Two Cities, after which I received about 500 positive emails. That time, most Somalis didn't know who my tribe was. Today, if I get one email, it's an insult, usually, labeling me. At the time, I really talked about the Mogadishu that I knew, the Mogadishu that I came to, that the book talks about how it was destroyed, which really welcomed me at the time with open arms. Not because it was a big city, although it was the first big city that I came and started to live, but it washed me of an identity that I didn't want to carry. It, for the first time, projected me as Faisal and a Hollandaise. That was it. People didn't know who I was. People didn't know my clan. People didn't know my tribe. They just knew me as somebody who came from the north. And to the people that I interacted, it was a huge geography. The Mogadishu that we have today, unfortunately, is one that lost all the cosmopolitan nature it had because of this clan cleansing. Not only did it lose that cosmopolitan nature it had, but it indeed also lost the diversity that it had. Even a diversity within a family it lost. So today, it became a turf for one small Somali clan. So forget the entire Somalis using this as the home that they all share. But even for the immediate family that surrounds Mogadishu, it's becoming a turf war. That diversity actually, in my opinion, was something that I captured, and the phrase that I really still value, that Ledwini's book talks about as a lost cause, is when a Somali Galbed who has the fatigue of the WSLF meets a Barwani who is a Harqan, a tailor, or the Wukoyi guy who just arrived and jumped off of the Dagadere. These are all the lexicons that we talked about to identify regionalism and regions, but at the same time embrace and accept the difference that we had. And Mogadishu was a place like that. Foolishly, we destroyed that, and I think the book talks about that. We destroyed a diversity. People talk about anywhere from 200 to 400 urban, solid middle class leaving Mogadishu and going to their origins and where they came from. Not to mention the 30,000 civilians that was killed, that the ethnic cleansing really talks about, the story that Somalis still has yet to talk and deliberate. We also, and tomorrow I'll be, the next panel I'll be talking about what is the impact of this 300,000 plus, 200 to 400,000 plus who left Mogadishu because they were clan cleansed back to their home countries, are now the champions of federalism, the champions of regional governments. Not to mention that Somaliland actually is playing with secession and Puntland and Jubaland very hard on their position when it comes to federal system. This book, in my opinion, is a prelude to a social repair. As a matter of fact, when you read the book, you kind of understand that Ledwin has probably a sequel to be writing. What next? What comes after clan cleansing that she eloquently really tells? And for those who really think that this book is about or against some group or not, it's not. And that's why she probably urges you guys to read before you make a judgment. It's critical of every social group. The Darod War, the Hawiye War, the Isaq War, but the book centers on one concept, that there is a massive violence carried against the Somali people. And I think that massive violence, often creating a class of victims, mainly women, should be read with critical eye. I thank her really. As I said, I started by saying that probably I will have a friendly critique of the book. If there is anything, I think one area that could have probably strengthened the book was to compare the USC's coming to Mogadishu with the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party's coming to Addis Ababa, EPRDF. As you know, there was 1 year difference or so. With the EPRDF, they literally moved into Addis Ababa with a structure of governance already developed in the jungle. The Tigranya People's Liberation Front not only had an ideology and a political program that was solid, but they had what to do next once they reached Addis Ababa, how to relate with other groups, and how to administer the country. With SC, the only weapon that they had, and the book talks about this, was a hate narrative. You know, if you liberate Mogadishu, you're going to get all these houses that were taken away from you, and the people who worked, the militia, without any education, anything, was so angry that the central command was literally encouraging them. Just to conclude, one story that's very interesting that happened that she narrates in the book was when the USC command, at least some of the commanders were sitting there, people were being hunted and brought, and you know, they will identify who is who, and then steps will be taken against that civilian. In the book, she tells about a woman called Edo Marian. She was captured, and they took Edo Marian, an elderly, and the contradiction is, on the one hand, you want to punish this lady, but at the same time, through tradition, you want to refer to her as Edo, aunt. So kill the aunt, kind of, you know, or on her way to be killed. So they take the lady to the commanders, probably Ato or Galal, one of them was sitting there, Ato, and they say, Commander, what should we do? And they say Edo. It's really very, you know, Orwellian. You are killing somebody and you're still giving some sort of respect. And Ato and the commanders were angry, and they said, how many times did we tell you not to bring this indigent, this type of people to us? Go and take her back. So they took her back. I think Ledwin is silent on that, what happened to that lady, but we do know what happened to other people like Professor Ebian, who was a critic of Barre Despite that, he belonged to the same general family that Barre belonged. And Ebion was killed and murdered by people who knew. Ebion was a mere professor, a simple professor who opposed throughout his life the Barre regime. I think you guys we need to read this book with a critical eye and see what you can take from that. I think lessons are to be gained from this, that a history that she talks about is a history that should never be repeated among the Somalis. It's a painful history. It's a history that changed forever. And I think that one good thing that came out from this, and I'll talk about this in my second panel, is the demise of the unitary state and the rise of federal Somalia. Thank you.
As a Somali who read the book, 2 points to highlight today and to kind of put it out, not to the wind, but to us Somalis. One is, I think this is an important book in terms of starting a conversation. And I think as somebody who is intellectually engaged with how to begin that collective communal healing, where we heal together and move forward from what has happened, I want to say thank you for writing the book. It's a courageous step and a difficult book to have written, so thanks. I think what it does as a Somali and the Somalis who are in the diaspora, who from the comfort of where we are can intellectually engage without the emotional, irrational kind of reactions, is it allows us to have that conversation. The conversation that was silent, kind of got silenced out, even in the literature that Lidwin has reviewed, that the poets, prominent poets, did not want to say who did what to whom, but they talked about the calamity. So maybe 20 years after, maybe we can engage in a very non-emotional way in how we're going to deal and unpack what we Somalis have done to one another. Because we need to have that conversation. And I think this is an interesting resource, which is really methodologically sound in terms of the research that was done for this book, that we can now, without the emotions, without kind of pigeonholing ourselves into boxes of clans, that we can have that conversation. That is one thing that it does for me. I think we need to kind of start having that honest conversation. The second piece that is really interesting is how do we as Somalis think about clan, right? Clan as Lidwin was saying, and think about how our identity was hijacked, first by the state, then by the warlords. And now we are in a position where no matter how good your ideas are, people are going to say, who is she? And put you into. So how do we begin to engage in our conversations in a way that knows what we did in the name of clan, what we have done to one another in the name of clan, how clan has been abused, misused in the political arena, but at the same time rejected as a unit of analysis. It is really intellectually challenging because that reaction, emotional reaction is, well, X clan did this to Y clan, therefore I'm on that camp. But I think and I like the way that you kind of talked about sexism and racism, and I think we can put clanism in that category, where we take people's identities and use it as an instrument of either a corrupt state or a corrupt warlord, and entice and mobilize people emotionally, and then later on leave the whole clan hanging, because really there isn't much that is done for the communal clan interest. So I welcome that challenge in terms of really separating the abuses and the misuses of clan from people's identity, and dealing with the leaderships of those movements in what they have done in the name of clans, because Somali clans did not decide to attack each other. The names of clans have been brought into the political arena and got abused. So thank you.
Anything else? Quick question for you, sorry. I haven't read the book, so I won't comment about it. How did you depict atrocity without sensationalizing it, without, making it, and change your opinion about evil? So how do we do that?
I think move I have done. Of course, there are cases where you report what the news reported. There are no pictures except for the picture on the cover, which was taken actually outside of Afgoye during the first road-based alliance coming back to Mogadishu. And that is a harsh picture, but I think it's also, it's an artistic picture. But I think mostly, so that's I think one way. The second way, I think what I've tried to do is by really trying to not make one kind of people the perpetrator, but to say, how come that ordinary people can be persuaded to kill in the name of clan? Yeah, and I hope that people, actually one of the projects that I would love to do next, but I don't know, because I understand if many Somalis say, okay, enough, let's move on. I, as a historian, as you say, it found me and I felt I needed to document it as a historian would. But at the same time, what I would like to see is more stories about those individuals who rescued people. Because there were actually many, many, many individuals at different times in different places who rescued, as in their name people were being targeted and killed. And I think that would be maybe be a way of bringing some of the experiences out, because I have like 12 vignettes. There is not large descriptions of people's painful stories. There's very few, and I used them to show three things. One, people told stories because they realized they were targeted because of their clan background. Two, they realized this was not just Morian and thugs. There were actually other commanders ordering these kids. And three, I found, after I had already written them down, and my God, most of these people survived because an individual of the group that was supposed to be targeting them saved them. Right? And so there are ways where you can at least dilute the story, which is a very precise story. Yeah, it's 2 years, and in those 2 years, there are perpetrators and there are victims. Nobody can deny that. So you'd have to read the rest of the book to realize that I really try to not only do that, but that's been denied, that's been unacknowledged, that's still being concealed, right? And that's why I get feisty sometimes before I can become nice again.
Research, how do we begin a conversation about reconciliation and healing when someone like me, who spent most of the 1991 witnessing death and rape in my own neighborhood, if I start talking about it, I will immediately be attacked, or I feel victim, so it's hard to have that conversation with people. What's your recommendation for us to begin that conversation in a way that's constructive and that's not finger pointing and blaming large group of people for something that they're not responsible for?
I talk loud, Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Because I think what will happen, it will immediately become the other thing people will fight for and jockey for and try to dominate. And I'm not sure that the Mogadishu that we know right now is a very good place for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission about 91. That's one. So the other one, I think what I didn't get to say, which was part of my talk, is that, if you think about the representation of violence, and when you represent it, like the poets, you're also intervening, right? So they represent it and they try to intervene and speak to people's qaranimo and to all the things that Somalis have in common, their language, their culture. So Somali mediations, therefore, of violence are many, and I think they happen every day. So whether we think of Christina Ali Farah's novel, Habaryar, A Little Mother, whether we think of the poetry, so Somalis, people in different places are doing a lot. The one you raise, which is moreover about this extraordinarily painful phenomenon that is very painful for Somalis on all sides, that of rape, right? That is even extra hard, and I think that I couldn't answer that. There are certainly, of course, people who have worked with this and who could advise you and maybe work with you. But I think one of the things people have said about this kind of rape in war or rape in terror warfare it is to signal that we never want to live together again. So the people who incited the Morian and the thugs to do that, and who allowed it, I just don't buy only, we don't pay them, we can't discipline them. I don't think that's quite enough. I don't think it's quite enough to say there's a militarized masculinity when people start fighting. A little bit more happened too, right? Because this is also why then I begin to speak of clan cleansing. Because things happened. Like let's take the 100 and plus Hiranayal of Galkayo, the peace party in Galkayo, who were abducted and never have been heard again. Why were they targeted? Because they were the memory and the civilian leadership that could potentially have made peace. So, but how we do that, I think, is a longer conversation and we can answer now. Maybe Jim wants to come in, but I would certainly be willing to talk with you about it outside of the session.
The fact that we have seen one of the largest scale mass violence with all its attendants, rape and killing and even taking children as slaves, those who have been victimized have been conditioned to not speak about. Even the very elites who talk in private to Ledwin to tell her the research and what she wants to get for her research will not be able to speak publicly. A man whose daughter has been raped is conditioned not to speak. I don't know the reason, but I do find this all over, and all of you know. Most of you here probably have one or two stories that you can relate, and none of us even went to the press, even when we came to the land of freedom, we still tend to hide. And I think part of the healing or social repair, if you will, should first of all begin with a person to measure the magnitude of the pain that we have inside, and then probably find out a way to bring that about. I don't think a South Africa type reconciliation is right now. I agree with Ledwin that the government in Mogadishu, who even denies such a thing happened, will manipulate by using its recently found darling love with the West for whatever reason, and it would be tainted. I don't think we are ready. Somali you would throw it out and it will lose momentum. I think the victims should strategize as to when to bring this issue and how and with what ammunition.
January, there was this big meeting in Toronto about what happened in Mogadishu, right? The clan cleansing in Mogadishu. And I was very moved by it. I mean, I'm sure we all saw it different ways. And not because they carried a book on stage towards the end of it, because that's really not that important, because I don't think many people had a chance to read it. But I was moved because everybody who was interviewed was saying, we are not blaming Reer Hebel. We are blaming a particular jabhat. Yeah? Now, whether they feel that totally in their heart, we don't know, but it's a beginning, one. And so what I would like to say, when people begin to talk to each other, can we please not immediately do it on YouTube? There must be intermediate spaces that are not clan spaces, that are not Gubaba Qabil or just, clan spaces, but they are planned, because when we say, let's speak truth to each other, you prepare for truth-telling. You need a space for truth-telling. You need a plan for truth-telling. And what I would hope that when people begin to talk about the clan cleansing and what happened to them, that they will do one other thing. We know that the regime of Mohamed Siad Barre was not a democratic regime. People were not represented in that regime. Clans were not represented in that regime. There were people of different backgrounds who were appointed and disappointed and put in prison and brought back and appointed, and the brother gets fired, etc. Right? There was a clan divide and rule going on. We know there was patronage, but we really don't know what that patronage was. Because if you read people like Bulhan and other people, what you find is that, okay, this guy, this Reer Hebel had the NSS, therefore all Reer Hebel were benefiting. It's not the case. Not all Reer Hebel were benefiting because one guy had the NSS. That person was not very much loved back in Son and Samak, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if you begin to say, I'd like to come clean about what was done to me on the basis of my clan, can we begin to have a conversation and say, you know, I also remember government patronage because I was of a certain clan. So could you then also out something that you did not deserve but that was beneficial to you? These are kind of things that I'm thinking about it if you, and not on YouTube, not totally in public, but you prepare and then you come out with a group of people who have already talked to each other, who say we do not want to be claimed by clan hate narratives. But we're at the same time going to take very seriously what was done. And it may not be necessary then to bring out every violent deed. Because I think Somalis have proven in the past that they can have people speak for them. But it is, I think, maybe a final word, I think that people have not written about their pain because they have been waiting for the moment when they can speak effectively. If there's a chance to get the houses in Mogadishu back, people will speak. Yeah? So I think people, whose shoulder would they have cried on? Yeah? Because by the time that people come out of Dadaab, a lot of other Somalis are also in Dadaab. Yeah? And so I think that effective speech then would be a speech that produces something for your community and for your cause.
The history of Somalia is full of violence and clan fighting, but never in the history we heard about rape. Women were protected, women were preserved. It was fight on war was between men. In your research, did you find anywhere how this rape thing started?
You know, I think that there might be some romanticization of some of the earlier fighting in Somalia. And I think that we have to think, that is one thing. But I do agree with you that this large-scale war rape is something new. Because Somalis in the past mostly did expect to live together again. Yeah? But of course, rape happened by the security forces of Barre in the northwest. Rape happened by the army of Siad Barre in Muduk. And I actually know a girl who jumped off the truck that was taking young girls to the camp of the military who is still limping. Right? So rape is not new. What is new, I think, is terror warfare that uses war rape to signal we do not want to live together anymore, and we will make it so horrible you will not want to come back. And we had a conversation this afternoon with somebody saying, like, I'm not ready to go back to Mogadishu. Right? So I do think it's new, and I then try to explain that by comparison to the large-scale violence against civilians in Rwanda, former Yugoslavia, and other places. And one thing I was not able to say to you that I feel so strongly. Why? I think we understand why Barre used large-scale violence against civilians. He wanted to undermine the support for the SSDF. And then he wanted to totally undermine what he saw as the support for the SNM. But what happens when the USC comes to Mogadishu and begins to kill and rape? What is going on in that is a different mindset right now. And one thing I think is that when we look at large-scale violence done by particular leaders, we have to understand that for them, this violence is productive. Because without that violence, maybe General Aidid would have never come to the top. Other people within the USC would have come to the top. And, I know this might be less popular in this, in this context too. Let's briefly talk about Jazz and Harti in December in 1992, just before the Belgians actually already in Kismayo. Why is there a killing and mutilating of a large group of Harti elders by a warlord? Right? I interpret it, and you can go read the book and disagree with me. One, I see it as a stage in the clan cleansing, because Aidid had just been in town the night before. And by the way, very close group among Jess, some of his closest colleagues were against this, right? So it's not even the SPM leadership that wanted this, but it happened, right? So it's a stage in the clan cleansing. It is also, I think, a fight between warlords, right? Jess and Morgan and other people are fighting over Kismayo. But, and this is why I'm telling you the example, it also is a moment at which the warlords, it happened to be Jess, I think it could have been Morgan, right, used violence against civilians to make sure there would not be an alternative to the warlord project. And when Ambassador Oakley is interviewed a few days later and said, Professor Oakley, what are you going to do about this? This happened on our clock, we have it documented. He says, we can't do anything, this is not our mandate, but don't worry, we will work with the civilian leadership. The civilian leadership which had just been massacred. Yeah, so violence is also productive for leaders who want their project to go and who want to destroy any alternative political project. So that's what I would say to that.